I'm going to be honest with y'all. I was not actually supposed to give the message tonight. But unfortunately, our planned speaker could not make it, so you are stuck with me. And to be honest, I decided today's message is going to be very simple. It might even feel more like a TED Talk than a sermon. Now, I don't know if anyone actually takes notes here. Whenever I see people on their phones, I tell myself that they're taking notes, and I'm just going to keep gaslighting myself. But if you do take notes, then start with this, the title of today's message. What's your why? A couple of weeks ago, someone slid into my DMs on Instagram. Now, I thought that everyone knew what sliding into the DMs meant, but my mom didn't. So for you Facebook fans out there, sliding into the DMs means that someone direct messages you out of the blue. And usually this is done in a flirty way. And if it's from a gay man, then, well, good luck. But someone slid into my DMs, and thankfully this time someone just said, "Hey, can I ask you something?" Which, to be honest, is one of those messages that gives you equal parts curiosity and anxiety, but still I replied, "Sure, what's up?" They ended up responding with a pretty large paragraph, but the beginning of it said, "I know you probably get this question a lot, but what would you say is your reasoning behind being gay and being a Christian?" Essentially, what this person is asking me is, why are you gay and a Christian? Why are you living your life in this way? Ever since I came out, I've been getting asked some version of this question, and I'm guessing you have too. Maybe not in a DM, but maybe from a family member, a friend, a pastor. I remember my coming out journey. I mentioned this before, but I came out my senior year of college, and my parents were some of the first people to know. And so I remember it was during graduation week, and I was sitting at dinner with my mom, and she looked at me and asked me a pivotal question. She said, "Connor, why are you gay?" And I remember looking back and honestly laughing a little because, like, really, Karen? As a kid, I watched Tinkerbell and not football. But anyways, nevertheless, she asked. And I'm willing to bet that you might have received a similar question. Why are you gay? Why are you trans? Why do you use different pronouns? Maybe it wasn't a conversation. Maybe it was an accusation. How did you respond? What's your answer been? Did you have one? On the flip side, being in the LGBTQ community, I feel like we are constantly being judged for being a Christian or a Jesus follower. And in those spaces, I continuously get asked, why are you still a Christian? Why are you still a part of something that doesn't support you? Why do you believe in a faith that's hurt you? And I'm sure that most, if not all of us, have been asked a similar question. And so here we are, caught between these two divided groups of people who want us to deny the other, each side constantly asking us, why? Why would we ever be different? So, what do we do with that? Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. Woo! And ever since I could remember, this verse was ingrained in my mind. It's 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. So essentially what this verse is saying is that it's important to be able to explain your reasoning, to explain your why, especially when it comes to your faith. So, what's your why? Why are you a Jesus follower? Why do you identify this way? Why are you living your life in this way? Now, let me be clear. You don't owe anyone a defense for your existence, especially not when the question comes in anger or judgment. And if your answer isn't finished yet, That's okay too. But I do believe it's important that we try to prepare for the questions that may come our way, especially when those questions revolve around our faith. And tonight, I want to help us think about how we can answer these questions. So, let's zoom out and look at something people outside of faith communities have noticed about us as humans. At one of my favorite things, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, who here has ever seen this pyramid before? Okay, a lot of you. I thought so. Maybe you're having some flashbacks to a fun little management class, or maybe a very fun session with your therapist. But let me give you some backstory. This concept was created by an American psychologist named Abraham Maslow in the 1900s. Maslow believed that human beings are motivated by a series of needs, starting with basic needs like food and safety, and moving up to more complex needs like love, self-esteem, and finally, self-actualization. That moment when you're becoming the best version of yourself, living into your full potential. In creating this, Maslow wanted to explore human greatness. And importantly, he wanted to do it outside of religion. Now look, I'm not a psychologist or a mental health professional. There was actually a time I thought about minoring in psychology, but I ended up minoring in communications instead, and they said that I would never use that, but here I am, communicating. Anyways, from where I'm standing, when I look at this pyramid, there are a few things that stand out. And they matter for us, especially us as LGBTQ Christians, as we're trying to figure out why? Now, here's the first thing. For us to reach self-actualization, to live fully as ourselves, we often had to risk or forfeit the needs below. Let me explain what I mean. For many of us, self-actualization meant coming to terms with our identity or our sexuality. But to do that, to come out, to live openly, we had to threaten or even lose some of the most important needs in our life. Relationships, faith communities, family support. And for some of us, it was even more dangerous. For those who came out at young or in unsafe environments, even basic safety needs like having a roof over your head were threatened. Many psychologists point to this as part of the reason why our community struggles with higher rates of addiction, anxiety, and depression, because we had to climb towards becoming ourselves while losing the very things that were supposed to support us. And that leaves an impact, a deep one. We've learned, sometimes too well, how to survive without having all our needs met. We've been conditioned to settle for less, to accept love that isn't safe, to chase connection even when it costs us our dignity. And I hate to say it, but let's just be real. How many of you have seen in your friends' dating lives, or maybe your own, someone give up their basic needs for a little bit of affection, even when it's at their own expense? It just got real quiet, so we're going to put a pin in that one. Another sermon for another day. The deeper truth is, many of us have been trained by trauma. If you were here for our Real Talk event a couple of weeks ago, then you heard Zachary talk about this. He named some of the trauma responses that come out of denied needs, risky or addictive behaviors, living in survival mode, fear of trust, and one that hit me hard, mistaking intensity for intimacy. Woof. These aren't character flaws. They're survival strategies. Strategies we learned not because we were weak, but because we were fighting to be ourselves. But the beautiful thing is when I look at this pyramid, this map of human needs outside of religion, I don't just see a theory. I see the reason for my faith. I see my story. I see our story. I see why I am a Jesus follower and am gay. And even more than that, I see a God who meets us in those needs. Because when I think about love and belonging, I believe we find it most fully in our relationships with Christ. A relationship that is built not on us hiding who we are, but on being fully seen and fully known. And because we can find so much of our identity in Him, not in the approval of others, not in the easy acceptance of this world, we can stand with confidence. And we can have a self-esteem that isn't built on how others see us, but on how God sees us. And even at the top of the pyramid, at that place called self-actualization, yes, a huge part of that journey is accepting our identities, but it doesn't end there. Accepting who we are is just one step in the path of becoming who God created us to be and following in the way of Jesus, loving God and loving people. So, back to the original questions. Why am I gay? Because I believe God made me this way, and I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Why am I a Jesus follower? Because I have found hope in Him, hope that holds me even when the world feels like it's falling apart. That's my why. Now, what about you? Maybe for you, your why is still forming, and that's okay. Maybe for you, your why is messy, complicated, still healing, and that's okay too. But don't lose it. Because when we lose our why, we can lose our way. When we forget our why, we start to forget who we are and who we were meant to be as children of God. At the end of the day, your why isn't an answer to other people's questions. It's a reminder to your own heart when the world makes you doubt. So, what's your why?